Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 39. Ghosts of Deeds Past. Again, Loki said. No, come on. We've been at this for hours now. Because you are so hopelessly incapable of focusing that it's pathetic. You say the sweetest things, dear. Stark answered with a smile. But seriously, I need a break. You need to train and strengthen your mind. My mind is pretty damn strong, thank you. I'm not talking about your intellect, Loki told him with a sigh. You are using your mind in ways you have never done before. It's like a weak muscle you keep overexerting. I was not overexerting anything, Stark argued. I am handling all the tech very well. You had a headache for 3 days after a car, Loki said, and this time his voice hardened. The hacking system was still in testing phase. I've worked on it a lot since then. Why don't you argue about this? Loki asked, finally standing up from the bed. They pushed the two together not that long ago, and they both sat with crossed legs on top of it for their now regular lessons. I'm just saying. And I'm saying that I will not let you fry your stupid brain when it is perfectly avoidable. You know the risks. You know you need this. Why are you arguing with me? Stark looked at him for a moment and sighed. I'm just tired. This is exhausting, like all-nighter in the workshop exhausting. I'm human. I need a break once in a while. Loki crossed his arms, and he knew it was glaring, but then he took a breath to get his temper back under control again. Fine, he gritted out then. Thank you, Stark said, and flopped down on the bed right away. Then he reopened his eyes to look at Loki before he raised an arm invitingly. Come back down here. He should have been able to resist this man a lot more. He did not argue, though, and sat down again, only to be tugged down by Stark into a horizontal position. He was not against being close to his lover, so he did not object. So, Milky Way, we almost reached it. Stark spoke after they settled down comfortably next to one another. Indeed. J-U-M-B didn't make any noise about leaving. I think they're gonna stay. Stay? Yeah. All the way to Earth. You might want to ask them about that instead of assuming, Loki said. I guess. It's just a hunch. Drongo's staying, though. Him I did ask. He's coming to Earth. There was really nothing to say to that. Loki presumed as much himself. Also, Stark decided to start stroking his hair, which was not a good way to keep him invested in the conversation. He even closed his eyes. So? What about you? What about me? He didn't have to look at the mortal to know that he rolled his eyes. Will you stay? That made him focus on the conversation again. He opened his eyes. We talked about this before, he said. No, we had an agreement at the very start. Stark objected. You go one way, I go another, but things changed since then. Loki moved away from Stark as he sat up. The man followed him and stayed close. I can't stay on Midgard, he said. Why not? Have you forgotten that I tried to conquer it? With an army? He asked incredulously. No, but a few years passed already. Even more time before we actually get there. We could figure something out. Now Loki really had to turn around to look at the man, because he did not know how they ended up discussing this. Stark was maybe thinking about this for a while now. That could be the only explanation. I doubt the humans would be very forgiving, Loki started. Not like he wanted their forgiveness, because he could care less about the mindless Midgardian masses. But it is not the reason why I cannot stay, he continued before Stark could interrupt. If I stay on Midgard, no matter how well I intend to hide, Asgard will know about it sooner or later, and they'll just send Thor again to drag me back there. And like I told you before, I am none too eager to return to my prison. Okay then. Okay, but if we can figure something out about compensating for the invasion, then maybe... The attack on Midgard is not their only reason to lock me up. I have committed crimes before that. Loki tried to stand up from the bed, but Stark's hand on his arm stopped him. They were in silence for a moment, then Stark shifted even closer to him. Loki wasn't sure if he was willing to acknowledge the relief he felt when the human did not pull away. Tell me then, Stark asked. Tell me what happened so we can figure out what to do. Loki turned a little to look at him and knew that the request was sincere. He thought about opening his mouth and telling him, speaking of all the things that happened that led him to this point. But then he looked at Stark's warm brown eyes and remembered how hard and angry they could be, and how cold they looked when he looked at those he despised. I can't, he said quietly, turning his gaze away. Tell the man who looked at him with warmth and affection what he had done. Tell him what he was. Tell him the lie that was his very skin. I can't, he repeated, shaking his head. He already felt like his skin was colder than before. Okay, Stark said after a moment of silence, and Loki whipped around to stare at him in surprise. His eyes must have been meticulously large, like some stupid frightened animal. What? Okay, you can't. We still have time till we reach Earth. I mean, I want to know. I kind of need to know if we want to figure something out, but there's still time. You, with your endless curiosity and bullheadedness, you are willing to wait for answers. Stark huffed. It's not like I told you everything either, he said then. So we're kind of even. I see. Loki nodded, even if that kind of left him with an unpleasant feeling, which means I know how much it sucks to bring it up, like digging fingers into a half-healed wound. Accurate, Loki commented. Sometimes doctors have to cut wounds open to clean them out, though. Stark continued. Otherwise, all that dirt and taint just rots you from the inside out. Did you cut your wounds open? Loki asked. Some. Stark nodded. Not all to the same person. Some know some bits, others know others. Most did not need me to tell them because they were there to see it firsthand. They lived them through with me, even if they never asked for my side of the story. And we know very well how different something may seem through the eyes of others, Loki added. Exactly, Stark agreed. They stayed in silence for a while, both of them just sitting on the bed. Then Stark leaned back down after a while. Tell you what, he started. Lie back down here with me and I tell you my story. What story? He asked. In answer, Stark raised a hand and tapped on the reactor in his chest. You know what keeps me alive, but I never told you more. I never asked. Probably for the same reason I never asked you to tell me your story before now. It was true, in a certain way. Loki knew that the story behind the reactor was something close to Stark's heart. It had to be something he kept well hidden. He never asked, because he was certain he would not get an answer. Now the answers were offered. It was strange. His words trailed off, and he shook his head. Then he laid down next to this brilliant, foolish man. After a moment, Loki rested a hand on his chest. The reactor glowed brightly under Stark's undershirt, buzzing with energy. Loki let a few of his fingertips rest on it and was pleased when the man did not tense or pull away. Stark told his story, and Loki listened to every word. And after the final sentence left Stark's lips and the last sound trailed off into silence, when Loki knew about the 10 rings in the cave, Yinsen and Obadiah Stane, the shrapnel that threatened to tear his lover's heart apart, he leaned closer and put a single kiss on the glowing device before claiming the man's lips as well. Oh, how very well Loki understood the pain of betrayal, the agony of lies from someone who was meant to be family. It was astonishing how something as fragile as a human could be so very strong. Fractured and scarred, but never broken, still whole. Iron Man with or without his armor. I'll go to Midgard with you, he said then. The smile that spread on Stark's face was not wide. On the contrary, it was small, and soft and pleased. What about Asgard? He asked. Loki sighed. Well, if Asgard tries to tear me away from you, I will certainly not make it easy for them. Stark chuckled quietly, his talented fingers wandering up to Loki's hair again. Okay, but let's think of other possible solutions, alright? Some that don't include blood, destruction, and possible manslaughter, okay? Killjoy? Loki droned, which earned him another soft chuckle. Loki. Stark spoke again after a moment. I'll tell you, he interrupted. I will, I know you will, the man answered confidently. Just not yet. I get it. Loki wanted to warn him that it would change things, that he would be unable to look at him the same way after he told him, but his lips stayed firmly shut. Stark had such faith for all he claimed to be rational and skeptical. Sometimes he was desperate to believe in good things. Loki stopped believing in those a long time ago, but here he was lying in the arms of the best there was. Loki did not force Stark to continue their training. It was better to let him work on his many inventions. It would clear his mind and ease the tension in his body that appeared as he talked about his past. So Loki let him be and stayed in their room to meditate and work on his magic. The trick with the energy crystals was a brilliant substitute, but in no way a permanent solution. He contemplated whether he should let it be. He was going to get his powers back as soon as they reached the 9 realms, and he could use the crystals until then. But his pride did not let him give up so easily. He kept thinking about it the day their journey would end. He did not like Midgard, not at all, but he generally disliked humans as well, and now he had Stark. He assumed that he ought to take his previous assumptions and experience with the realm with a grain of salt. Stark couldn't be the only human above the level of the brainless mob. There were billions of them, and there had to be at least a handful who came at least close to such as Tony Stark. His mind kept going back to the Avengers, but the more he thought about it, it was only Banner, the Beast, Stark talked about with relative respect. Certainly there were others who had interesting, even exceptional qualities, like the dear little widow or the director, even Barton. But spies and assassins were not the sort Stark would ever look at with true respect. He just acknowledged their usefulness and necessity. He could also clearly see that the good captain was the same kind of fool Thor was, dazzling noble heroes looking down at them from their moral high ground, the perfect golden protectors. He shut down that line of thoughts. He would just get angry. He was not convinced that it would be a good idea to stay on Midgard for long, not convinced at all. But he would not be made a coward. He would not hide, not from any of them. And he would not be alone. Not this time. And all of Asgard could go to hell for all he cared. He wouldn't let them ruin this. Stark was right. There was indeed a plan that needed to be formed. An impossibly loud noise blaring from all speakers wrenched Loki out of the depths of his mind, and he was up and running towards the bridge a second later. Yu caught up with him in one of the corridors, but she did not ask any questions, just followed him. Stark was already inside, and so were Drongo and Bee. "What is happening?" Loki asked. "Some ship," Stark answered. The D&I was already up on his head, his eyes looking at everything and nothing, while different displays appeared one after another. They're not playing nice." "What do we do?" Jiu asked. For a second, Stark was silent, and Loki was undecided whether to wait for him or to start telling the others what they could do at all. But then the man snapped himself out of his silence. "The first shot they let go was a warning, but I already had to slow down and change course so that we don't hit anything. So, yeah, we're gonna have to fight back. I can control the fence and the small close-range turrets through the main system, but not the big cannons. Someone definitely needs to take the one on top, I guess." "I'll handle that," Drongo interrupted. "Used anything like that before?" Stark asked. "There's been precedent," the giant replied. "I'll figure it out," he said, and already headed out without another word. "Okay, good," Stark said. His eyes flickered to the side, probably checking the other ship again. "They're bigger than us and faster, too. This is... Okay, side canyons. Chuyu, do you remember how they work? I know we only talked about it once." "I do," she nodded. "You take one. I guess that leaves you to..." He turned to Loki, but he shook his head. "Bee, take the other one," Loki said, looking at the girl. She nodded and left with her sister. "Does she even know how to use it?" Stark asked. "She was there when we explained it to Juyu. Trust me, she's observant," Loki reassured him. "We don't have the firepower to defend ourselves," Stark said then seriously. "Not really, not at all." Loki knew he was right. He did not have to know everything about the other ship. The Iron Mage was a cargo ship. It was slow, and while it was sturdy with a heavy defense system, their firepower left indeed much to be desired. "How many energy crystals do you have in your workshop?" Loki asked. "Few boxes, if that's enough. Depends on what you need them for," Stark answered. Loki thought about it for a moment, because that would not be enough. He used up almost a dozen for a simple teleportation spell. But then he realized how Stark charged the crystals. "How much energy do we have in the generators?" "We charge them on Zakar, so almost full. You think you could take energy for magic directly from the generators?" Stark asked with slightly widened eyes. "If I can. We may have enough firepower," Loki said. do you have any idea how much energy there is when the generators are full? Stark asked, his eyes focused on calculating. A lot. I know, Loki said and headed out. You better be careful, Stark told him. Make contact. Figure out what they want. Maybe it's not too late to get out of this without a fight. The alarms blared up again, several displays turning red in warning, and this time even Loki could feel a small shake under his feet. They were either hit or something exploded very near to them. Yes, because we're always so lucky, Stark said. Go do what you think is best. Just let me know in advance. I will, Loki promised and ran out. When the generators were full, they could travel for months, 5 to 8 months depending on the route, without having to stop, so he knew exactly how much energy there was. He couldn't risk taking too much, if he could make this work. The shields, their turrets and cannons, their systems, everything was powered by the generators, and so was the life support. Also, their engines, so if the generators were too drained, they would be stuck with no means to reach the closest star to recharge them. So Loki kept calculating how much he did have exactly as he made his way there. Can you hear me, Stark? He asked then. Of course, the man answered, his voice coming from some nearby speaker. Whatever I come up with, it has to be the last resort. I will only try it if we run out of all other options. You need to tell me if we reach that point. How risky is this? Stark asked. We don't have time for this, Loki answered right away. I know how to handle power, even great power. You need to trust me. Okay, yeah, Drongo is in place. The girls are almost there, Stark informed him. The other ship? Closing in, so you better hurry, Stark told him. The next moment, the whole ship shook again, more vehemently than before. Loki kept his balance easily, but he had to touch the wall for a moment. That was a hit. Stark said, everyone hurry up. Drongo, get that big boy up and running. I'm in place, Loki heard Juyu's voice, so Stark literally opened up all communication channels within the ship. He was running down to the main generator on the narrow stairs that led there when the ship shook again. This time he was not so successful with keeping his balance. He slid down the stairs, barely able to catch himself at the last second. Even so, he cut his palm open on the edge of a step. He bit back a curse and continued running. Incoming call, Stark announced. I guess you all want to hear this? Loki kept going, but he paid attention. Oh, how long it took me to find you. Warm blood, sounded a deep voice from the speakers. But not like Drongo's calm and soothing. It was jagged and sharp, like the edge of a saw. I don't think we've met, Stark answered. Loki finally reached the generators, and he started looking over everything Stark installed there in order to get energy in his workshop. He had to use that to get to the energy. Not personally, the voice answered, but you and your little Skrull friends took something that is mine. Loki lifted his head. Warm blood? And now this? Something reptilian it had to be. I think you got the wrong ship, pal, Stark answered. I stored something on Yerba. The voice continued, and Loki knew right away that they were indeed the right ship. Something I had Bro got for me, and you stole it. They were most definitely the right ship, but they only took maps. Which one could have been that important? Nope, that does not ring a bell at all, Stark answered, and Loki was impressed by how very much it sounded like the truth. I will take back what is mine, the deep rumbling voice continued, like it did not hear Stark at all. And then I will take great pleasure in killing every single one of you for making me chase you this far. Well, that sounded just delightful! Loki sighed and focused his attention back to the device in front of him. They needed something back, so they won't destroy the whole ship. That was a great advantage. Unfortunately, it was also their only advantage.